Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about loops. So in programming, a loop is a sequence of code that is continually repeated until a certain condition is reached. So you might have some data that you want to work with and build on. You want to do that over and over again until something happens. The three most sort of straightforward and most common types of loops are the while loop, the for loop, and the for each loop. And we're going to look at all three today. We're going to start with the while loop because that one's a little bit easier to get your head around. So a while loop will repeatedly execute some code until a given condition evaluates to false. You'll see what I'm talking about here. I'll just write this up first and then we'll discuss what's happening. Okay. So the while loop has a couple of parts to it. So firstly, it's created with the keyword while, and then its condition goes in these parentheses here. And then the code you want to run whilst the loop is running is in between these brackets. This is the body of code. So as long as this condition in here is true, the while loop will keep running forever and ever. As soon as that becomes false, the loop stops. So in this scenario, outside of the loop, I've created a variable called num, and it's got the value of 1. And in the loop, I'm saying whilst num is less than 6, print out num, and then here I'm incrementing num. So each time the loop passes through, num will go up by 1. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see what will happen is that eventually number won't be less than 6, so this will be false, and the loop will stop. So we'll see that happen now. Just have to put in my read line so that the console window stays open. Oh, and then you can see it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's walk through it again. So number is 1. This bit of code will get read. So whilst num is less than 6, that's true at the moment. So we print out the number 1, and then we increment the number. The loop goes back to the top, looks at its condition, and goes, number less than 6? Well, number is now 2, so this is still true. Print out the number, increment the number, and so on and so on and so on, until the number becomes 6. So then this is false, and the loop stops. So you should take a little bit of care when writing while loops, and to make sure that your condition will at some point be false, because otherwise you can end up with your program just stuck in a loop forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So this will run until we have a false thing. So you want to make sure that at some point it's definitely going to become false. Otherwise it just gets stuck. It can cause problems. Right, so next we have the for loop. I'm going to leave this stuff here for now, and you'll see how the for loop is similar to the while loop, but a little bit different. And as always, I'm just going to write out first and delete these out for now. What I did there, by the way, was double tap tab. That's a shortcut where IntelliSense will create what it thinks you want. In here. Right, so this is the structure of the for loop. We have what's called an initializer, which goes in here. We still have a condition, which is there, and we have an incrementer, so something that's going to increment our initializer. Now the way this matches up to the above is I'm going to write the exact same thing, but inside the for loop. So for the condition, I'm I'm going to have it the same. So I'm going to have num is less than 6, like that. The initializer, so when we do this in the while loop, there's no space in the while loop to do that, so we had to create it manually outside of the loop here. So I'm going to take that, put that into my loop. And then the incrementer is the same as well. So the for loop lets you do that inside the parentheses. Take my incrementer, which is this num++, put it there. Get rid of these comments now as well. And you can see what that will look like. Cool. So the for loop has 3 parts. So initializer, condition, and incrementer. And they're separated out by these semicolons like that. Put it there. And that's it. And then same as we had above, anything inside of the brackets is the block for the loop. So I'm just going to do nice and simple, just console right line number. Cool. So you can see how this is the same. That matches to this. This is the same condition which was here, and this incrementer is here. So it's the same thing, but all the parts are captured inside of the parentheses of the for loop. So it'll do the exact same. We should get the same result. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It works slightly, it still works in the same way, but so this, firstly, this initializer is created first when the code runs through and reads this. It doesn't create that every single time, so it only gets created once. It then evaluates the condition and goes, yep, this is true, so I'm going to print this out. Once it's done the block of code here, that's when the incrementer kicks in. So the increment increments our initializer. This becomes 2, check it, run code, then go back and do the initializer. This becomes 3, check it, do the code, then do the initializer. So like that, until the condition is false. A for loop is a little bit tidier than the while loop, and is better for when we know exactly how long we want our loop to run for. So I might want to do 1,000 iterations of this loop. Just increment my condition there. A while loop is good when you have something that is true and you know at some point it's going to change. So in real life, you might see while loops that are a bit more like this. Wouldn't have the, I mean, you can do them the same, but you wouldn't really have the counter, but you'd have some sort of condition here saying, while this thing is true, run code, and then later on that thing might become false somewhere else in your program or during the execution of the loop. The while loops are more succinct like that, and the for loop is a little bit more accurate. You can tell exactly how many times we want it to run, and it will just go through and do that for us. All right, the last type of loop that we're going to talk about is the for each loop. This one is my favorite. I use it all the time. It's super, super useful. So for each loop will loop through every element in a collection. So you have to have some sort of collection to run it against. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It doesn't have any purpose. So a collection could be an array, could be a list, it could be a dictionary, it could be anything that has a number of elements is a collection. As we've done arrays in a previous lesson, I'll use an array here now as well. So we'll do a string array called names. And I'll just put a bunch of names in here. That should be enough. That's an array of names, people's names. And then what if I wanted to loop through every element of this array and do something with that data each time. That's where the for each loop comes in super handy. And again, I can press double tab and Visual Studio will print out a little one that I can use. So we'll go here, string name in names, console right line. Perfect. So what's happening here? So for each requires that you create a variable inside of its parentheses, and then you tell it what collection you want to loop through. So this variable here will get created when the loop first runs, and then it's gone after that. We can't access it outside of here and say name, do something with name. It only exists inside of the for each loop when it's created. So here I'm saying for each name in names, we can think of it as for every name that appears in names, I want to do something with that. So in this case, I want to print out the name. This is going to loop through, it'll jump over each element of the array and it'll print out the name. Oops, and I'll put my read statement back in at the bottom. There we go. Matt, Mitch, Martin, Dennis, Jared, and Aidan. So my loop ran through, went through over all of these elements and printed out each one. It doesn't matter what you call this variable, and you also don't have to tell it what type it is either. It could just be var, and it can be called anything you want. It could be item, say print out the item. You might see that actually comes up quite a lot. I say for each item in this collection, in this array, I want to print out the item, right? But good practice is that you align this variable, you call it whatever you're working with. So if this was a list of employees, for example, at a company, I would say for each employee in the employees collection, I want to print out the employee, right? That's just a good way to line it up. This comes in super handy when you want to work with the data and filter the data a little bit before you do something with it. So I might only want every name that started with M, for example, in here. So I could say if employee starts with an M, then print it out. So in this case, I should only see Matt, Mitch, and Martin. Cool. There we go. So the for each in this case still ran through every single element in that collection, but it only printed because it got to here and it went, if the employee, if this string starts with the letter M, print it out. Move on to the next one. Does it start with M? Yep, print it out, print it out. It gets to Dennis, it goes, it doesn't start with M. Move on, move on, move on. Okay. So for each loops are super helpful when you have data that you want to work with. Okay, so that concludes the lesson on loops. So you have the while loop, the for loop, and the for each loop. There are other types of loops you can do, but those three will get you through most programming scenarios, and then the ones that come up the most. So if you learn those three and get your head around those, you'll be in good hands. All right, next lesson we're going to move on to methods. So you saw me use another method here, which starts with write line as a method, read line as a method. So we're going to go on and talk about those next and create some of our own methods in the next video. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and have a nice day.